Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons. We're trying to take a darker, edgier tone with everything we do. So if you like edgier kind of content, hit that like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Support us on Patreon. The link is in the description. And for all of your dice needs, go to Dice Legion and use the promo code SINISTER to get 10% off. Their website link is also in the description. So without further preamble, let's get into this week's video, the Inquisitive Rogue. The Inquisitive Rogue comes to us from Xanthars' Guide to Everything. This rogue is really greatly built for role-playing scenarios. If you're playing a heavy role-playing game, a Ravnica game, something where there's a lot of political intrigue and a lot of hoops to jump through, this is a rogue that will speak volumes to that campaign. It'll be wildly beneficial for you to develop this kind of a character and that kind of a concept. Rogues as a whole do have a lot of great concepts that work really well depending on how you build their skills, because they have such expertise and so many skills that they get proficiency with. You can do a lot with them. So strategically picking the proficiencies that you really need for your campaign is incredibly beneficial. That being said, with this kind of a rogue, you're going to want certain skills, and we'll go through them as we go through this, but this is a rogue that has a certain level of responsibility for taking that step to being involved in role-playing, and not just taking a step back, and not just being like a face because you're a swashbuckler, but really trying to do the heavier lifting with some of the more important skills that not everybody really invests heavily upon. The first ability you gain at 3rd level is Ear for Deceit. When you choose this archetype at 3rd level, you develop a keen ear for picking out lies. Whenever you make a Wisdom Insight check to determine whether a creature is lying, treat any roll of 7 or lower on the d20 as an 8. This is very important, particularly because of how important Insight is to Inquisitive Rogue. Your other abilities will have, there's another ability that will have an importance for Insight, so you definitely want your proficiency in Insight. Your proficiency bonus starts out at a 2, and at this point you're sort of building towards 3, but an 8 will always be at least a 10, and when you get expertise, you should be putting it into Insight, so that way the lowest you can roll is a 14 without putting anything into Wisdom. You're going to want to put some into Wisdom, and it's important why when we get a little further down the line. But being able to have this at its lowest, a 10, means that you're pretty much guaranteed to make a pretty good understanding of whatever's going on. This is very beneficial to you. When you get further along the line, it's just going to add on to it, so do not neglect Wisdom when building this rogue. Your next ability is Eye for Detail. Starting at 3rd level, you can use a bonus action to make a Wisdom perception check to spot a hidden creature or object, or to make an Intelligence investigation check to uncover or decipher clues. Why this has to be a bonus action is a little curious to me, but maybe in a scenario where you do see that somebody goes invisible, maybe you might want to use this as your bonus action. But this is really an adventuring kind of a skill, where you walk into a room and you want to make sure there's nobody invisible there, or you want to make sure that you can pick up on something that might be hidden, or like a passageway or a doorway or something. This is something to help build that kind of theory. As an Inquisitive Rogue, this is kind of in your wheelhouse. You're kind of that character that's trying to uncover clues and secrets. You're really a spy in a great kind of noble medieval kind of fashion. Like, it's very cool, the concept that you have, and this ability really kind of steers you towards that. Again, it shows you the importance of having Wisdom as something you don't neglect for a rogue, because now you're gaining extra things for perception, you already have something for Insight, and it's going to be important to you when we get into the signature ability. The signature ability of the Inquisitive Rogue is Insightful Fighting. You gain the ability to decipher an opponent's tactics and develop a counter to them. As a bonus action, you make a Wisdom Insight check against a creature that you can see that isn't incapacitated, contested by the target's Charisma Deception check. If you succeed, you can use your sneak attack against that target, even if you don't have advantage on the attack roll, but not if you have disadvantage on it. This benefit lasts for 1 minute, or until you successfully use this feature against a different target. First and foremost, there is no limit to how many times you can use this ability. So you will be throwing this on constantly. As a rogue, that gives you a great wider range of targets you can focus on. If an enemy in the back is a caster and they have a front line of enemies that you can't reach through, now if you do have a long range attack, you can actually hit that and deliver sneak attack damage and help change the dynamics of combat. Maybe they have an AoE effect going on or a concentration effect that's really debilitating your team. Now you have a counter to that. Now you can do something to try and stop that. And it really broadens what you're available to do so. Because this uses your bonus action to start it, and it does last a minute, you have to be wary of your positioning when you start this. I happen to love being in melee combat, so I make a lot of dumb decisions, and that puts me in melee. This would eliminate your ability to use cunning action, so you won't be able to disengage or hide or do things like that. You have to be strategic when you put this on. So maybe you take a ranged weapon or a throwing dart or knife or something, and you use that to set up, and then maybe you go in closer and work on something else. It's not a concentration, it's just something that you have on. Be sure to be using this constantly, so that way you can broaden what you have to do in case there are more important targets that your other partners and friends cannot get to, so that sneak attack goes a little bit further. Steady Eye. You gain advantage on any wisdom, perception, or intelligence investigation check if you move no more than half of your speed on the same turn. This is not a fancy ability, but understand that if you do gain advantage on these checks, on average, a lot of the way the min-maxers and real mathematicians that do this game, they give advantage to basically equating a +5 to your roll. So solving a problem, breaking a puzzle, figuring something out, uncovering important information on a desk of some big important person, this is that benefit. This really, really helps you in those scenarios. At level 9, you kind of want something really, really exciting, but a lot of the times when you hit level 9, you get adventuring or ribbon abilities that really don't increase your combat effectiveness. You're a rogue, your effectiveness comes from sneak attack, which increases regular increments, so don't worry too much about that. Really focus on who your character is at this point, and what your subclass means, and what your actual background means, and really understand that this is just making you significantly better at something that's great. If you are looking for something, I imagine you're not running at full space, so you're probably moving at least half your speed if you're moving at all. So you will have this anytime you do really need to use it. In case you need to do this in combat, in case you heard a sound and you rolled initiative and you don't know where somebody is, this is beneficial to you. This will help you decipher where sounds are coming from. If you've ever been in a combat where additional noises were coming from somewhere and you knew that meant more enemies were coming, this could be a great way to depict where they're coming from and put yourself in an advantageous position. Skills like these have an availability to be useful. The more creative you are, the better you'll get with abilities like this. But ultimately, this is again an adventuring ability, which rogues are usually pretty good at. So I really wouldn't jump for joy at this, but it's still something that helps you solidify your out-of-combat importance. Unerring Eye. At 13th level, your senses are almost impossible to foil. As an action, you sense the presence of illusions, shape changers not in their original form, and other magic designed to deceive the senses within 30 feet of you. Provided you aren't blinded or deafened, you sense that an effect is attempting to trick you, but you gain no insight into what is hidden or into its true nature. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, a minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. Earlier I mentioned the Inquisitive Rogue as a perfect subclass for a heavy role-playing game, a game with a lot of political intrigue. This is an ability that really screams towards that. This is something that's very important for weeding out who is deceiving you by pretending to be something they're not. Changelings, anything like that. People that are using magic to manipulate you. It alerts you. It's not a roll, so you just know it's happening. But if you're using some of your other abilities, you do gain the ability to discern what that is. Using Unerring Eye to notice that there's something amiss, and then using Steady Eye will help garner you figure out what that is. The important thing is what you do when you have that information. Well, now you might try to intimidate that information out of them. Now you might try to use that leverage to gain advantage on a scenario that you previously were at equal footing or lower. You can try and pressure them to doing things you want. You can threaten them. You can try and hurt them. This gives you options. This gives you the availability to let that dark side of you out. Because someone that's going to this extent to lie to you, rest assured, is up to no good. And now you've caught them. Maybe they were going to ask you to assassinate someone. Now you have them. And what will you do with them is a great question. Eye for weakness. At 17th level, you learn to exploit a creature's weakness by carefully studying its tactics and movements. While your insightful fighting feature applies to a creature, your sneak attack damage against that creature is increased by 3d6. First and foremost, this is a very high level to get to. A lot of the times you will not be rocking out at 17th level. But if you do, you will be doing 9d6 damage on your sneak attack. So you will be rocking out at 12d6 per round just from sneak attack. And if you go further and actually end up maxing out at 20th level, that is 13d6 per round with your sneak attack. It's very strong. I do wish you got this earlier, but it's hard to justify that much of a damage increase on an ability that you can use an unlimited amount of times. So it's one of those things that's just a little quirky to see. But it flat out, it's just a big damage boost. At higher level combat, sometimes combat is wild. It's sometimes a DPS race. Sometimes you're fighting things that like reduce healing around you. So if you don't kill it fast enough, you won't be able to survive the fight. There's a lot of dangerous things that you can be fighting at level 17. Burning things down faster is a benefit. Insightful fighting you have and you can use at any moment. This just ups that damage. Ideally, I wish there were more scenarios where you could use this. It's just so, and it's so applicable. It's because you can use it every fight, every enemy, multiple enemies in one fight, and it's just consistent damage. All you have to do is hit. And if you're at 17th level, you basically just need to roll a tad to hit, usually at this point. So it's just a great, great damage boost. Unfortunately, most of us will never see it. Our final thoughts on the Inquisitive Rogue. This rogue has this great opportunity to be that evil pursuant detective, like that high inquisitor that person whose job is to just root out secrets and know what's going on no matter what the cost is. It's a great concept that you can dive into on so many different facets. You can be a noble, you can come from a high place, you can be just working for a law office, you can just be a soldier, and this is what you do for the military. These things can really push a very confident kind of character. Because you have to be in these scenarios, and you have to build yourself to be able to go up to someone, and even if you're not sure, or even if your roles tell you, yes, this is true, you gotta play the game. You really gotta figure out if this is the best opportunity for you to spring your trap. If this is your best opportunity to cause a severe betrayal, like whose side are you working with, and which secrets will you keep for your own personal benefit. You'll find people, you'll find things, items, objects, and you might be in a scenario where you and your party are like, wow, this could really damage somebody, but we need their help to get something we want. So maybe we use this as leverage. Dependent on the game that you're in, if you're in heavy political intrigue, those opportunities are very real. Those chances to just go up and approach these power players in an area are tangible. If you're not playing a heavy political campaign and you're playing more so a traditional module where it's like 50-50 or so, the strengths of this character will not be as greatly used, which is unfortunate. I think a lot of these things are fantastic, but more often than not, you don't really need to be able to tell if somebody's lying when you're crawling through a dungeon. So this is a character that as a rogue would excel phenomenally in this kind of a scenario. And when you're not a charisma-based character and you can do role-playing things, it's always cool because you don't have to lie your way through. You know, you can use a lot of fact and truth, or just talk to someone and just discern that they're lying and let them lie to you to understand what they're going for, what they're after, and who they're doing it for, just by reversing the information they told you. It's a wonderful tool for that kind of campaign. But again, if you're not in campaigns like that, where you're combat heavy, where you're just looking to get out there and hit high numbers, you're not going to be happy here. And it's a shame because I see such great creativity and tactical advantage from being able to put sneak attack wherever you want it and not requiring other party members to follow suit or to follow a strategic kind of way of fighting. A lot of the rogue falls into that standpoint where you're just reactionary. If you go first, yeah, maybe if you're doing a surprise round, or if you have advantage on your first round of attacks, yeah, maybe you'll be able to get it off. But rogue going first, unless he's an unseen attacker, what is he doing? Most of the time, rogues are better off going second or third, or waiting for one of your party members to go first, or at least to get into melee with an enemy, so that way you can get sneak attack. But with this, that high dexterity benefits you in an initiative roll, because if you go first and none of your friends are near anything and you're all being openly seen, you can still rock that sneak attack on first round, and you can move it around and you can bounce and do different things and really gauge yourself strategically and give yourself options, because you're not so reliant on other people for your damage. You're really reliant on your own availability to see what's around you. And that gives you a great concept. And when you take that outside of combat with what you can do with this rogue, you have a character that doesn't have to be flashy, pretty, charismatic, that can still talk to the most important people in the room. And that's cool, because you're not supposed to really, like you're not built that way. And that gives you a lot of strength in your own confidence in playing this character, and it helps breed this just wonderful, like, confident, strong-willed, just who knows the truth and just doesn't need to be charismatic about what they're doing. And I like that concept. I am a really big fan of the Inquisitive Rogue, but I am more role-playing oriented. I do like characters that can do things like that can really weed out the truth and really hang with the big boys in the top of the food chain in cities and kings and nobility. I love that kind of stuff. I also like doing extremely dangerous stuff by really taunting them and trying to get them to do whatever I want them to. That being said, my ability to bring a knife to a gunfight is a poor idea 90% of the time, but other players really should take advantage of Session 0 so you can make sure you've picked the right character for your campaign. Discussing what the campaign is going to involve, what kind of things you're going to do, is a great way to understand, is this character meant for that campaign? Is this character good for that campaign? Am I going to do a lot of role-playing? Then maybe I want a role-play-oriented character because that stuff is going to be really important. Is it just going to be dungeon crawls and jumping in and out of quests really quick with very little roleplay? Then maybe this is definitely not the scenario for that kind of a character. Always work it out with your DM. Always talk and do Session 0. And try to refrain from making your character before you enter the game, because it helps to clarify what you're building and what you need to be building, which is a great concept. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. It's always a great help to the video, to the channel, if you stick all the way through to the end. Please like, share, subscribe. Tell us your stories about Inquisitive Rogues. Tell us your stories about roleplay campaigns. Just tell us how you felt about it, whether it was great, whether it was for you or not. Check us out on Patreon. And if you do need dice, again, use that promo code SINISTER on Dice Legion and get that 10% off. And thank you all for giving a spooky kid a chance.